us to propose and put this talk together, but is enjoying studying Savannah right now, so don't feel sorry for him.
And I'm Barbra Ghilardi. I'm a reference instruction librarian. Thanks for coming.
So, see our library there in the background. So I want to just quickly give a little overview. Sorry for giving you a homework assignment before you came, but thank you for those who filled out the surveys. So in the sense that, let's see, there's a nice range of experiences with the framework here. And that's one thing we really want to draw on in today's session is kind of the local knowledge that you have implementing and thinking about and talking with people about the framework. So, but just to give a little bit of overview, the task force charged with coming up with the framework first began their work in 2013 and started to make drafts publicly available starting around 2014 and filed that final draft around beginning of 2015 and was adopted by the board about a year later. And somewhat controversially rescinded the standards in June of last year. And then for those who are eager to get their own copies, don't have them already, and want the standards, they're going to be removed from the website shortly. So just remember that. In case you're a standards aficionado. And as many of you probably already know, the framework is organized around these 6 frames. Some of them I think are a little more clear than others. But the goal is to kind of take the kind of task-oriented standards and reframe them in terms of more knowledge practices or dispositions, kind of habits of mind. And so they're a lot less prescriptive than the standards. That's one of the kind of controversies about them. So one of the motivations for developing the framework was to account for the kind of technological changes that have occurred since 2000 when the standards were released. So there's a lot, obviously, that has changed. There's also a lot that has changed with respect to pedagogy and learning theory, and so the framework tries to account for those changes as well. Not uncontroversially. Now, I've seen Lisa Hinchcliffe talk a couple of times about a constellation of documents that ACRL has created that you can use for assessment practices. And so the framework isn't an isolated document. So just as a reminder, some of those include the ones I've pulled out here. But as another reminder, there are other related professional frameworks and other documents that frequently come up in conversation and then apply and work with the framework in a lot of ways. Particularly the framework for success in post-secondary writing, especially if you work with a lot of first years. And many institutions love the AAC&U Information Value Rubric, which was developed in part based on the original ACRL standards. So what we want to do is to take about 10 minutes to get into some groups, and I want you to discuss some of the successes, and if you haven't even tried to implement these yet, maybe some of the concerns or some of the aspirations you have for implementing the framework, and then maybe some of the challenges you've also faced or anticipated facing. So we had a good mix. Just really quickly, by show of hands, how many people have gone at least part of the way toward implementing the framework at their institution? So you guys are clustered in the middle. I don't know what that says necessarily, but that's great. So maybe if you want to kind of turn toward your flanks here, and let's organize ourselves into groups of about 4 to 5. And I'll come around, and Barbra will come around, and we're kind of eavesdrop a little, but in about 9 minutes or so, we'll share. And if you could identify like one common success or one common challenge that your group had.
Okay.
We'll roll nowhere. Bumper cars.
and showing how to use database. They're getting this along with the community.
We're doing
Yeah, because
That's kind of how we do it. Just kind of contextualizing. Well, we already do in certain workshops, and being like, okay, well, we're gonna put it in like sort of the language of the framework. The other thing that we've done that's like is sort of different is we run a faculty workshop every summer where they are focused on developing university courses. So that the curriculum for that is we literally give them the framework as in terms of like just defining what the university is, and then so we kind of start with them to have them sort of understand special concepts and all that, and work towards how they develop this in their courses. Yes, because
in the summer.
it's stipended.
It's what?
It's stipended.
Okay.
So yeah. It's also capped. We only accept up to 16. So we run it every year.
How does it apply to almost or the students? First time in college in 20 years. I've never came to it's sort of, you know,
No, that's a universal issue. Yeah, something that we're struggling with too. Is like we are empowered to say no, but it's still hard, and you still will have a situation where like you have your agenda and parts of it will just sort of take over anyway because they're in the classroom and they're like, show them this, talk about this, do this, and you're like, okay, well, you're going to be doing it for like 3 hours.
My college is not about something there. And I think like a lot of the criticism about Fairfield came from the community college. It was a lot of the community colleges talking about it. It's just okay, and trying to process it. I read it and I look at it. I hear what everyone is doing with it. Meredith Sarkis, she had a webinar recently. She's talking about how community college can use it, and I'm just like, this kind of processing this stuff, and I'm still like.
Do you find that you're probably already doing a lot of what's in the framework anyway without really defining it step by step? Because I think that's what we're doing at MCC. So do you find that you're covering a lot of what's in the framework?
But I think the framework, the reason why it's also moved away from what you're focused on, because a lot of it you can say, okay, you got this skill, you finish this process, you know, where this is more of, it's a different way of looking at what we're trying to accomplish in the classroom. So whereas it may be the same thing that's being done, it's that even the whole assessment side of it, you know,
I think the assessment part is the hardest.
yeah,
Because it's like,
and everybody wants assessment.
yeah, it's like, I get it what everyone's doing. I feel like it's still teaching the skill set, but then trying to figure out like, okay, student, do you actually somehow now believe in the idea of scholarship and conversation? Or are you just like, you know, doing the discrete skills that like you've gone over, like you learned in other classes or something? But I feel like that's a huge stumbling block for us, even though we've tried to determine what it is.
Like the databases that have a Google open with search results and authority is construction contextualized. Why are these guys
Yeah.
and I have them here,
Yeah.
going back and forth with them. It's just you know, the daycare, etc. I've done things to share where you like show them parasol.
And even like the whole aspect of magazines have that wonderful system where you get paid to, work with the library, but everything like this.
Yeah.
I have 4 classes plus my shell class.
Which one is which?
No, you can't get them in the
They're just
summer.
busy. There's like,
Think,
if I
pair,
don't-
share.
that's a really good learn. There are some that I don't know, but without that,
Yeah, a lot
The
of
whole
them.
thing started before I started there. The whole thing started with the data script, funded initially through Grant, so that's always an opportunity to learn framework. My colleague also implemented what she calls a course design spa, and the budget for that is like minimal. It's basically we provide food, and we pay for massage therapists, neck massage. That's the extent of the cost. But the whole day it's a day activity where we bring in consultants from all the academic services. So you can talk to a librarian about information literacy in your course. You can talk to a mentor about developing learning outcomes from our Center for Teaching and Learning. You can talk to somebody from our Center for Diversity and Inclusion about how you bring in more diversity in your classroom, et cetera, et cetera. There's like 10 different branches of consultants. So they're all excited to do it because they're like, I'm sure faculty they can do stuff. And then faculty like it because they're sort of like, they have this whole day devoted to building, working on whatever it is they want in relation to the course. And like I said, budget-wise, it's low hanging fruit. It really is. So there are definitely things you can do when you don't have money.
Information literacy concepts like, is it okay?
And when I get faculty and I talk about it, they're like, what? It was changed? You know?
Yeah.
We don't have a status anymore? Even today, some of them, they have no idea. So just sometimes it's just kind of librarian world will change. And everyone is just kind of like,
based on the Camtasia quiz.
like, you know, we have to be the ones to initiate and talk and get people to know what's going on.
We're gonna do that in the fall, we're working on it now. Clicker.
Do they not see there's like no
Have it
extra
in red ink on my finger. When do you have to decide? You know, and then questions 4 or 5 on the quiz later, or any questions, when do you have to decide? See what the defense is about. I said it, I told you.
Oh, definitely.
So when they do the clicker thing, Tiara, we get the email of all this. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, Kiara helps us with our stuff too. So she has,
It's all the emails and Google Forms and makes it sensitive. No, just that way. For my own personal evaluation, I've done assessment. I forgot the whole question. Before I came in, I was unsure. Now I'm sure. On a scale of 1 to 5.
In terms of the sort of
Argue
disconnect
with my
between
boss when it comes to
performance and research,
review.
do you feel like that comes
Nobody
from
gets to see
research, or is that coming from faculty?
Reinvent the wheel. It's kind of fun.
Right. Yeah.
Anything I could have improved that
Yeah, I mean, if they don't care for faculty, it's the faculty are the ones that are like evaluating that, so it's important to them. Yeah. I've done some work. We also have a very performance oriented, well, many of our programs are performance oriented, like especially in our school. It's like pulling teams to get into production faculty, those classes into the library, work with the library, because they just
Is that fair? Is that, you know,
but with like performing arts, it's been a little bit easier. I work with the required first year intro performing arts class every first year performing arts student has to take. And their assignment in that, or one of their major assignments that's tied to the library, is they have to do dramaturgical research, the research of topics related to a play. So in that sense, like they really use it like that's only like
imagine doing it as Beethoven. So I had a lot of interesting conversations. Most of the challenges and I heard that that's to be expected. But maybe if we could just go around and maybe share one maybe if we start over here with this group.
What?
One takeaway,
Is there a
maybe,
challenge that
or a
stands out
challenge,
for you, or is-
or a success?
Well, the challenge that I think that I had was in terms of working in college and started studying that. How do you teach the framework to students that have never experienced it? You know, you have to take some time in one class. How do you, and you have to assess that. How do you do that when you have a student that, you know, said earlier, a student that hasn't been to school for years, a student that's, you know, that's
Doesn't know how to log on.
doesn't know how to log on to,
Right.
foreign students.
Basic.
You have a wide variety of swath of students. How do you add this framework for all those students, you know?
And for us, all of our classes are one shot, and never, we don't have a first year experience yet in our college, so we never see people more than just once, and a lot of we don't see, so.
Yeah, that's very good.
We have a limited amount of time to cover a lot of material.
Challenge or even success is something.
Assessment, how do you assess? Yes.
It's really hard. Maybe the group back there, challenge or
Yeah.
success, or,
Our challenge is definitely assessment, but we have a success rate.
Assessment.
Yeah.
Also, I say the challenge is looking at the organizational structures such as NEASC or the AAC&U still, you know, or NEASC eliminating library from big parts, and then AAC&U still going by the standards. But we because we're doing mapping on our campus, we revised our college goal for information literacy to model the frameworks last summer. So we met with, and even just I think you know, having a conversation or starting a conversation is progress. So if you're having conversations with folks who are doing assessment or in charge of assessment at your college and institution, just explain to them, hey, this happened.
I find the connections with disciplinary documents really helps with that. It lines up. I mentioned the CWPA document, which really maps on in a lot of interesting ways to framework. So just pointing out some of those connections is sometimes really helpful. Great. This group in the front.
Well, our information literacy librarian did do a nice scaffolding, general scaffolding for all the different programs, but of course the challenge as always is to continue to embed. We're really just embedded on the freshman level. So, and we haven't even really touched upon its true assessment yet in any real practical way.
I think there was one more group that was kind of off to the side.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge, but it's a success story too, as far as communicating and verbalizing the framework with faculty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the theme of the framework is a good conversation starter with faculty. Absolutely. I'd say, just kind of pulling out some other things that people were talking about as well, that there are a lot of challenges here, but the one goal of the framework was to kind of be more abstract so that you can implement it in a more specific way at your local institution. So those conversations was always kind of step one in that process. So that's a great, it's great to hear that they've been so successful in that way. But we're going to talk about some of our experiences at Fairfield. We're not, you know, all the way toward the end of this process by any means, and maybe Barbara will tell us a bit about our program.
Sure. So I'm gonna, I'll just give you kind of some background on the program, and then lead you into what we're doing and some of the assessment we've started doing too. So the first year experience of programs started in 1998, and it was a partnership with the English department, which I'm sure a lot of you are doing at your own institution. It's kind of a partnership that makes sense in terms of outcomes and goals and things. And the nice thing about this partnership is that we teach, we get to see nearly all the freshman students in both sections, so they're getting a unified experience. And so that really helps us. And the classes are about 75 minutes long, so we see them 75 minutes in the fall, and we see them 75 minutes in the spring. So we've thought about how we try to relate our outcomes outcomes to sort of be a continuation. And that's how that's worked. So again, guaranteed face-to-face time. I should also mention that the program is largely taught by adjuncts, which is challenging for us a bit, but also, gives us the opportunity to get to know a lot of different faces from the English department and work with them. We've had a couple different iterations, and I'll go a little bit more into the learning outcomes in a minute, but we also had different tutorials that we sort of brought into the first year information literacy program too. One being the research tracker, which was an online form that we actually used a step-by-step process of teaching the research process to the students in EN12, so we literally go through step-by-step at one time. All the freshmen take a plagiarism tutorial. At one time that was in this program. And also in the spring, in the EN12 section, they also had a critically evaluating information tutorial they had to take in addition to coming to the class. So there's been all different things going on. I should also mention that although we guaranteed C all of their freshman students the first year, we also started creating in the discipline documents to sort of lead from there. Most of our classes, as someone said, are one-shots, especially down the line, but we have made relationships with professors over the years that have kept those going. So just really quickly, the evolution of our learning outcomes. I should mention that myself and Matt, my colleague who is not with us today, we started in 2015. So the learning outcomes have sort of evolved beyond, but most of the work with the framework started when we got there. So just quickly, we had learning outcomes, and they were modified slightly over the years, but in 2014, there's a lot of discussion about the framework. We started to have a lot of discussion with the different colleagues, and they decided that we need to start thinking about problem-based assignments, giving students the opportunity to be a little bit more active in the classroom. That we had not really looked at the learning outcomes, though, in terms of the framework at that time, just activity. When Matt and I joined in 2015, we took a hard look at our learning outcomes and tried to figure out, where can we put the ACRL framework or map it onto our already existing learning outcomes. And that sort of happened this year and continuing on. So I'll just show you really quickly, because I don't want to spend too much time on this part, but things did not change that drastically, you'll notice. We tried to do what we were doing, take what we were doing and map it to the frames and say, okay, what are we already wanting our students to learn? We were really excited about the framework, and we wanted to figure out, what can we do to sort of infuse it? It's only a 75-minute session. The students aren't gonna, get it all together by the end. They're not gonna understand everything, but what kind of, learning can we bring in the 75-minute session that will map? So we got rid of a few little things and sort of tried to condense, but like you can tell, it's similar. For EN11, this is the fall, EN11, so they're just coming to campus. In the spring, this is EN12, and EN12 is more of a research class for our students than EN11. They don't really do any research, very limited research in EN11. So in EN12, all the professors are supposed to assign a research project of some kind. So we try to incorporate that into our lesson. The big thing that we added this year was trying to think about interdisciplinary research and coming up with effective tools and search terms that would show that. So that was our addition this time. But previously we had been talking about Boolean operators, which are important but kind of meaningless to students. We were talking about research plans, so again that whole step-by-step process. So it was difficult. The students weren't walking away with as much. We were trying to get them to think a little bit bigger, more holistically. So that's what we were changing. Go ahead. So then when we started, we had to start thinking about the activities we were doing in the classroom, trying to make them more active. And luckily, the framework has kind of given us a good place to think about that, good jumping off point. So, and they also allow better assessment opportunities. Which I'll get to. But so we do a couple different exercises. I'm just highlighting a few here. The information life cycle can we have a conversation with students about how information evolves? So we created an activity where the students are given a scenario, and they have to think through how would I organize, or how would information be created, and how would over time, based on an event. So what would be created first to what would be created maybe many years later. So they put together this list, and then we have a conversation in class about, why is some information created right away? Why does other information take a long time to write and create, be available for the public? So, the trajectory. And who's writing it? Why are they writing it? Those kind of conversations. We also have them do an evaluation exercise in that class, evaluating different types of information based on a scenario, and trying to decide where that information is coming from. Is it reputable? Is it valuable to the scenario that they're given? So it gets them thinking a little bit about authority. Does this person have the authority to write this information? Where are they getting their information from? So getting them to think about that. That's in the fall, and that's a very early stages, getting them, kind of considering information inspiration. In EN 12, we do 2 different exercises that dive a little bit more into searching. In our research tool exploration, we actually have them do a search on Google about dolphins and how they communicate. And we want them to look through the search results and see, okay, what kind of results am I getting? And particularly this was pretty good because you actually get a great mix. You get scholars in there who write blogs about dolphin communication, and then you get organizations that write about dolphin communication, and then you even get scholastic kids. So it was a real interesting mix for them to kind of consider, how is Google helping me answer this question, and what kind of results am I getting? And then after that, they would go to biology database and do the same search and see what kind of information they were getting there. And what we wanted them to realize was actually some of those authors in biology database are also writing on the web. And so what is the difference between the web information and the information in the biology database? Is it a peer-reviewed article in the database and not a peer-reviewed article on the web? So those kinds of things. We're trying to get them to understand the relationship between the tools. And then we also did an activity, again, introducing this idea of scholarship as conversation within disciplines. And so in this activity, if you want to bring it up, they had to read Dulce et Decorum Est, a poem. And we wanted them to pick out keywords in the poem first that they thought described the poem or were interesting to them. We wanted them to just pick it out. And we used Poll Everywhere here to have them display it on the board so you can talk it through. So you'll see, it's just straight words from the poem. And then we had them go to Literary Reference Center Plus, which has the MLA International Bibliography in it. And we wanted them to look at the subject terms that were in there and see, okay, what are people writing about this poem, and what are the key concepts that are jumping out there. So we had them put those up on the board next, and we wanted them to see the difference between the types of keywords they were coming up with just in the poem, and then the other keywords that other authors classified their work as. So this conversation, what are people already talking about in the discipline? So it's really interesting. And we also wanted them to see that, some of these cross disciplines. So what will we do then? Go off and search, pick a topic, and think about what discipline it might fall under, and kind of go to different places to look and see what kind of information you could find. So we wanted them to kind of think about a big picture. If you're in an English class, you might not necessarily have to use an English database all the time. You might need to go other places and look for other information. So we're trying to show off that scholarship as conversation and interdisciplinary work. So all of this work that we've done, and it's happened over the last 2 years, has made us think a little bit differently about assessment. And everybody's mentioned it's really, the framework is really hard to assess. Prior to the framework and starting to revise our learning outcomes, we were doing straight quantitative assessment. So they'd take a quiz at the end of class, and it would be questions like this. I understand the difference between types of sources and feel confident in my ability to choose an appropriate source. Do you strongly agree or strongly disagree, or you fall somewhere in the middle? You know, I don't think that was very helpful for us, and I don't think it was very helpful for our students. They weren't really showing off the learning, and they could say they strongly agree that they got that point, but they might not have understood it at all. So that was easier maybe to analyze, but not so helpful for us. So then, this last year or two, we've decided to go more qualitative. And it's harder to assess qualitative, obviously, but what we're finding is we're seeing a lot more. We're learning a lot more about what our students are learning. So instead of asking that question at the first there, we're asking more scenario-based questions and trying to get them to explain. So for this question says, for your college history class, you're trying to find information about last week's earthquake in Chile. Which source would give you the type of information you're looking for and why? So we had them think about it and write about it. So that's sort of where we've gone with this. We've definitely tried to think more about, looking at them and trying to get the learning from a better perspective that way. It takes a lot more work, like I said, but gets us a better picture of what they're walking away with at the end of class. So we have kept a quiz of sorts, although we call it more activity. We don't tell them it's a quiz at the end of class, but we do informal assessment throughout. So I'll just give you a snapshot of some of the things. Oh, this is that was the EN 11. This is the EN 12. So we initially had them pick a topic, what keywords did they use, and then we wanted to know if it's scholarly or popular, that kind of thing. But then this year we added a few more questions. We wanted them to explain why they thought it was scholarly or non-scholarly, and then we wanted to hear what they thought about the research process, what words came to mind, and then why might you use Google over library resources and vice versa. So we wanted to hear a little bit more to pick out some of that learning we had done earlier in the class to see what they kind of walked away with. So both sessions, like I said, end with a kind of culminating activity quiz of sorts, and we see over 1,000 students, so we end up pulling just 100 from EN 11 and 100 from EN 12 to analyze. We do this. We have part-timers help us. But we give specific things that we're looking for to help them analyze the data. So and us to analyze the data. So we give criteria. This was one of the questions. So for your college history class, we were trying to find, the same question as before, sorry. And so 89% of our students said they would use quicker forms of publications such as news sources, social media, TV news broadcasts to gain information about this event. So, coming back to that information life cycle that we had talked about before, trying to think, okay, this is something that just happened. What kind of information would help me? I put a quote from one of the students. You're most likely looking for a newspaper article because that will have fairly accurate information. In addition, newspaper articles are published faster than books and scholarly articles, so you are more likely to find information in the newspaper if the event only happened a week ago. So trying to keep that sort of piece in mind. And then this was another question we asked about. You're writing a paper about the history of Japanese Zen gardens. You know almost nothing about the topic. Which type of source would be your best starting point? And we pulled words, and the source types listed here are the words they actually use. We wanted to kind of call the list based on what they were calling it. Because that was interesting too, to see what do they call the different kinds of resources. So this is what they called them. And most of them chose the library website, which what I thought was interesting. But we also had a lot, kind of all over the place. Encyclopedia was another one that was big, 16. So, and video, they thought, web search. Yeah, so there's all different kinds of responses there. But 83% of the students that answered the question identified that general and background sources were a good starting point. So again, trying to see what they were doing. It's interesting to see their language. And then in the EN 12, what we want them to do is find a source. What was the best source they found? Was it scholarly or not scholarly? And 84% identified it correctly, which we thought was pretty good. And again, we used kind of the names things they did. Author credentials is something they were looking for in both areas, whether it was peer-reviewed or not, source type, that kind of thing. I always think it's so interesting when they call it the library database, just because, again, like, I don't know what they really mean by that. You know, they stuck it in the search bar and just went, I guess that's what they mean. So, so it's interesting to see. And these numbers are definitely higher than they used to be, mostly because we weren't really assessing this way before. We weren't really finding out what the students were learning. But again, this is sort of the beginnings of things, and we're working toward new directions too.
Yeah, so some of the things that Barbra talked about, particularly the keyword exercise that we use pull everywhere for kind of line up with our writing programs, objectives. They're moving toward a writing across the curriculum model, so we're thinking about, and this is true for any writing program, but we're thinking about more rhetorical uses of research and information, and thinking about audiences, purposes, things like that, starting to map our own instruction onto things that they're concerned about, so that we can speak the same language and kind of reinforce those things in both situations. So we're going to continue with that. We haven't fully moved to writing across the curriculum, but the ACRL framework pairs up very nicely with that because it's sort of a researching in the disciplines model or researching across the disciplines model. Those two things frequently work together. So the framework itself is embedded in information science as a discipline. That has some issues and some opportunities, but we're going to keep kind of pushing this out in the different disciplines with which we work. And thinking about, along those lines, those threshold concepts, that's another key to the framework, and that's, like our keynote speaker said this morning, those are things that you can't unlearn if we buy into the definition of threshold. We're going to look for more holistic ways, so this is really what we want to see in terms of genuine learning, especially if we're doing more qualitative feedback. How's this going to look across their 4 years of undergraduate? So by flipped instruction, I don't necessarily mean what we usually talk about. I mean creating a sort of sequencing or scaffolding outside the one-shot bibliographic instruction session so that we can push out some of those more mechanistic things that we like to teach, push it out through online tutorials and other things with buy-in from faculty members so we can focus on more kind of genuine active learning in the session itself, and then we can think about assessment. We're gathering assessment from those more mechanistic things, but then also thinking about other ways to assess what's going on in the classroom itself. And complementary to that is just pushing out to other disciplines we haven't worked in yet. So the key is really getting some more research artifacts. So getting examples, working with the faculty to get first-year writing artifacts, and then going to the capstone courses and getting some of those. I know a lot of people have capstone archives of one sort or another. That's a good way if you work with the department to start to gather those. And the key, because these are very hard to assess, is to remember that you don't have to assess this all the time. You don't have to assess everything all the time. So we're working on sort of a 5-year scale now, where we're targeting certain learning objectives in 1 year and then letting it go for a cycle and coming back to those. So, I mean, really, using the framework to assess is a lot more labor intensive, so it's really important to keep in mind this sort of strategic structure and remember that you don't always have to assess everything. And then, there's been some discussion in the literature about how the framework connects with other concepts like critical information literacy, really getting at the kind of power structures that create our information and describe its dissemination. So they work together well in some ways and not so well in others, so we're kind of pushing out in those ways too. So I don't have all that much time. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. This is another thing from Lisa Hinchcliffe, which I thought was really important just to mention. If you're thinking about kind of backwards design, and this is for a session or even for your whole information literacy program, the key here is using the framework as a way to kind of have the discussions, figuring out what your desired results are. So having those discussions with the faculty, determining what counts as acceptable evidence, and that's going to be really grounded in the disciplines. And then this is more on the library. those experiences and instructions, although of course faculty and administrators can be involved in it. But we found, especially with grading these artifacts, is that faculty members want to participate, but they often don't have time to do so. So we've had some grading sessions where faculty members would come, but others where they just couldn't find the time and sort of kind of was left to the librarians. So, you know, bring the faculty in when you can, but the conversations are really the important stage where we want to get on the same page about the goals. Yeah, so we're cutting short our group activity, but maybe we can instead, how much time do we have? About
15 minutes or so.
About 15 minutes? Okay, that should be enough, actually.
Well, without question.
Without questions, oh yes. So
Time gets away from up here.
yeah, 15 minutes, maybe we're just opening it up to questions here, because I know there's a lot to talk about, and this was such a snapshot. So.
Just kind of backtracking to one of the previous slides where you were talking about using artifacts and rubricing.
Yes.
And the example where you pulled stuff from first year and then also looking at capstone.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how you do that, how you develop the rubric specifically? And if you ever run into trouble with, like, you know, maybe your first year artifact is like, I don't know, like a one-page blog post, but the capstone project isn't kind of multimedia.
Yes.
So you have very different projects, but you're still trying to look for the same evidence?
Well, I did a lot of this work. I'm fairly new to Fairfield. I'm the instruction coordinator there, but I did a lot of this work at Haverford, so I'm glad to see a fellow Haverfordian in the audience here. But I'll tell you what we did there and what we hope to do at Fairfield and some of the things we started to do. But the first thing we did was sort of come up with four-year snapshot rubric, where it's not judging, you know, excellent to poor, but just what are the goals for each of the 4 years, right? And then translating that into a specific rubric for any particular project, right? So, you know, we use the framework as a basis. We use disciplinary documents for the basis of those rubrics, those 4-year rubrics that we developed. So we're not beholden to the framework necessarily, and I think that's for me, that's kind of a key because, as some of you mentioned in the group conversations, faculty don't, you know, some of this is jargony. That's been one critique of the framework. It doesn't always resonate with faculty members, especially in different disciplines. So meet them where they are, you know, think about what's important to them in terms of assessment, and really partner. You're helping each other get to where you want to go. So it's not that we're responsible for all of this, both in terms of assessment and in terms of instruction. So really, you know, to my mind, you know, if we did a lot less, I hate to do a lot less, but if we did a lot less and had more conversations one year, I count that as a bigger success because it would move us to where we want to go eventually. So, and I know, you know, thinking about the larger institutional assessment issues that there's always sort of pressure to come up with these things, but you know, the framework requires some flexibility, and I think that's kind of key. Getting comfortable with that discomfort is a key part of the process. Yeah.
I'll just talk a little bit about our rubric. So we developed a rubric to evaluate information literacy. It's based on AACD, which is not the framework, I understand, although we've tried to bring the framework in to at least give them some other view of information literacy to kind of, anyway. So the rubric, it's a really interesting, the AACD rubric is not meant to evaluate an assignment, it's meant to really evaluate a cohort. So we've just started our assessment, and it's done by the assessment person in our institution, so it's not done by the library. We're on the committee, so we've now had a committee of faculty members who aren't necessarily in the discipline where these artifacts have been random sample of artifacts from our English comm class. And so we get together and we look at the rubric and we take a sample and we normalize it so that we all have a basic understanding. And it's not like poor or good, it's baseline, they're progressing, they've reached or they're the best ever. So it shouldn't matter what the assignment was, you should be able to look at this piece and just evaluate the information literacy part of it. It could be written terribly, But that doesn't mean they didn't have great information literacy. So that's all, so we normalize it, and then we each get 20 that we have to evaluate. And each piece will be looked at by 3 people so that there's some kind of, and so we're kind of right in the middle, so I have no conclusions on how that will be. But we're only going to do it in a cycle of 3 to 4 years, I think. So we've just started this thread, so it's just the freshmen who've done it. So then by the time we do the information literacy thread again, we'll actually have artifacts from every single year of whatever courses are in our thread, which will be a capstone, a 4th class with freshman, sophomore, junior, and so in 4 years we'll have a much better picture of whether or not this assessment is working. But still thinking about this, how to put the framework into it. Maybe that's not part of our assessment, but if we scaffold this is just what I'm thinking right now. If we scaffold it, then we can do the instruction as a framework, even if it's getting assessed as a standard.
Yeah, and lots of important things to pull out. I just want to mention the framework listserv actually had a really good, interesting conversation about the relationship between the framework and the AAC&U rubric recently. So that's something to look at. And there's lots of ways that they can work together. A lot of what you said is familiar. The norming. The one challenge with faculty I find is that it's hard for them to turn off their disciplinary lenses. They're looking for, is this a great political science thesis? No, that's not exactly what we're looking for. So
if they know anything about the topic, they're already see this. They got terrible information literacy because they picked this one, whatever.
Exactly.
This one article from the New York Times that they thought was terrible themselves. So then, yes, it is hard.
Other questions? Yeah.
I mean, this isn't about the discussion at hand, but I liked your lesson with the poetry. But I wonder if you could just say a little more what you did with the words that they were pulling out, and then what did you do with that?
So what you did?
Yeah, so when they pulled out, we had them go, so first they looked at the poem, and they picked out some words that they liked about it.
So, and I'll say, it's from the poem or just things that were descriptive?
Yes, we're descriptive of the poem, right. And then we had them go to the Literary Reference Center plus database and look at the topics and subjects in there. Then we had a discussion about the words they were finding there. And what we wanted to do from there was have them choose a couple of those words and create a topic around it that they would want to research. And think about, what kind of topic would it be something where they look in an English database and they also might have to go look somewhere else? Or, what kind of discipline does it cross? So that's basically what we were trying to do. We're trying to get them to think about that.
Yeah, exactly. And we start them in Literary Reference Center Plus to emphasize the textuality of information. Right? And these words are being used differently among literary scholars, obviously, than they would be among historians or political science scholars. So the other goal is to get them to realize that research is an iterative process, and you don't always have to kind of the old exercises where you totally come up with the topic off your head. Maybe you start to brainstorm on the board, which is a useful way. But for many students, they're intimidated by the topic. They don't know. They don't have the vocabulary yet. They don't see those conversations. So that's one thing I underscore is that when you're looking at a set of search results, whether it's in Google, a database, wherever it may be, you can pull out those conversational threads. So that ties into the framework there too. And you can see as you move from databases, those different conversations around the same concept or same word. So there's a lot that you can do there. We have them move on to their own topics and apply those methods to their own research, and we go around and help them then. But they don't come away perfect experts, but we can see how they're taking that concept and applying it to their own works.
Yeah, yesterday, the keynote speaker, I don't know if you guys were here yesterday, you mentioned what do dogs hear about the Cesar Millan dog whisperer.
Yeah.
You mentioned the question, when you think of research, the research process, what 3 words come to mind? What do they hear and see?
Yes.
what are some of the words that you get? Do you know any?
Yeah, I can, so
I
some
don't mean
of,
to pick on a spot.
no, that's fine. Some of them give kind of generally what we talk about in class, because what we do is actually one of our first exercises I didn't mention was we have them on a paper in groups, write down what their research process is when they approach research. And we want them to think, come up with whatever your deal is. Like as a group, come up on your. So some of them follow those words and they'll say, I go to background sources, or I take notes. But then some of them say difficult or struggle, or that's the three.
Once you're really honest.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're like,
Yeah.
I
Like,
went to Google.
boring, things like that. So we get kind of run the gamut of that, which is it's interesting to see. Yeah.
These are my students. I said the Latin means again, search again, and again, repeat, reiterate. So you're not going to get it the first time.
Right. And that's something that I don't think they like. I think they come in and they think they know everything, and they think all it takes is one search.
That's the other thing about the Pull Everywhere exercise is they see, I had these terms. I thought I was good to go. And actually, no, I need to look at these other terms. And I left out a key piece, which was they search the title of the poem instead of keywords in database. So they're seeing what the conversation is around the poem and what words emerge there, and comparing it with their own the terms that they put out.
That's a good way to bring in that whole, the scholarship as an online conversation.
Exactly. So, fantastic. And I would say, just tangentially, we have a library research prize, and we were just looking at the results. And what's striking, of course, is not news, but it's striking how differently faculty members, because they have to write a letter of support for the applicants, how differently they define research. So, very few people in our communities are on the same page.
Almost nobody has the same idea, which is kind of crazy.
Do you think you might shift the outcomes of the faculty vision of that in the future, or?
I think we are talking about doing something with
Hoping,
that. Because we get a lot of great artifacts from that prize.
That's another way of getting artifacts.
Another way. Throw a prize.
I was just gonna say, when I do old students and I ask about sources used, I get that library database answer a lot too, because I think they think like that's the right answer. Right? I wish that term would actually go away so we could focus on what different sources actually. Library database, I learned it, I know.
That's the other thing too. They're always, we have a federated association of some. They think that's all they need, and this exercise that we do also gets them to think about disciplinary databases and how they can be filters that help the conversation, help their research and creating conversations that are embedded in disciplines. But the thing that we struggle with too is that, EBSCO, for example, is so interested in its branding that they often write EBSCO.
I see that a lot.
I'm so happy, but John Henderson, but I know well.
Exactly.
Are there other questions or comments or experiences?
Anyone else want to share what they're doing?
I guess it's not really like a success necessarily that we're doing, but one thing that I think has kind of helped us when thinking about kind of what the framework and feeling overwhelmed is we've started having all the librarians track after they do an instruction session which frames they think they cover. So we have a Google form, and we have not only the frames, but we all sat down as if we were building up that, well, what would this frame look like in the classroom? And all of those are options. And then after each session, we ask everyone to go in and just kind of quickly check off the boxes of what they think that they might have hit, which has been a good reflective process for us. But even though there are gaps, I think it's making us feel better too, that even though we're not necessarily at the point of knowing how to incorporate it in a systematic way, we know we're hitting those topics even in what we're already doing. So that's been kind of a nice interim step for us. Like, well, at least we're on the right track.
We tried to, the library has overarching learning outcomes for the whole library that we mapped to the university learning outcomes, and that was something we were thinking we mapped are the framework to those learning outcomes too, so when it comes down to assessment, we can kind of think about it like that too. So where you can, that's good.
So we're happy to share these slides, but I'll point out some other sources too. The framework listserv I mentioned already, the framework toolkit from the Illinois consortium there, the framework sandbox, it's still early days for that, but some examples of assignments and things are up there. And this newer resource core, if you haven't seen that before, for online research assignments. And then, especially if you're working with first-year students and working with writing instructors, I think it's worth looking at that and just mapping out for yourself before you talk to faculty the kind of connections between those. And they're using a lot of the same learning theory and language. Really fantastic. And then, as you start to kind of think about this, even at the first year, kind of the disciplinary contextuality of research, the interdisciplines guide at the ASRL instruction section is really good too. So, yeah, it's challenging, the process, rewarding, and I think metacognition is really a fundamental of the framework, and I think it's a good exercise for us as librarians too to just have that time or have the impetus to reflect on what we're doing